Dober večer na okrogli mizi, ki jo trenutek v okviru cikla dogodkov Umetnost, nevroznanost v galeriji prirejata Narodna galerija in Sinapsa, Slovensko društvo za nevroznanost. Naše sodelovanje se je začelo Dober večer Naše sodelovanje se je začelo pred leti, ko smo uvedli v galeriji brezplačno večerno risanje pred umetninami, dogodek, ki smo ga izvedli enkrat letno, in ko smo opazovali obiskovalce, kako rišejo v tišini, mogoče celo nekoliko zamaknjeni, smo se začeli spraševati, kako opazovanje umetnin ali pa ustvarjanje pravzaprav vpliva na človekove možgane, kaj se takrat dogaja. In prav to vprašanje nas je privedlo do sodelovanja z društvom Sinapsa, s katerim smo v preteklosti že organizirali predavanja, diskusije, na katerih smo iskali stičišča med umetnostjo in nevroznanostjo. Tokrat smo se malenkost odmaknili od vizualne umetnosti in se podajamo v nevidni svet glasbe s 3 strokovnjaki iz tega področja, več o nocojšnjih gostih, ki se jim tudi v imenu Narodne galerije lepo zahvaljujem za odziv in za pripravljenost za sodelovanje. Torej, več o njih pa bo povedala predstavnica iz društva Sinapsa, Ines, kar predajam besedo.
So, a warm welcome also from my side. This event will take place in English because of our guest from Italy. So Sinapsa is a Slovenian neuroscience association which aims to promote neuroscience and related topics to a broader public. Every March we organize Brain Week, Teden možganov, which is a week of lectures, panels, and workshops on neuroscientific topics. You're also very welcome to attend it this year. Before we actually begin the discussion, I would like to just say something about the technicalities. In the chat section, you should find a link to Slido, which is an app where you can ask questions for the panelists. And at the end of the discussion, we will open the debate. Now, just a bit about our guests here. Dr. Katarina Habe is a professor at the Academy of Music, University of Ljubljana. She obtained a PhD in psychology. Her thesis focused on the effects of music on cognitive functioning. That's also her. This topic is also in primary importance of her research, and she's a published author in peer-reviewed journals such as Psychološka obzorja, Brain Topography, and International Journal of Psychophysiology. So, welcome.
Julia, welcome. Hello.
Okay, then Dr. Gregor Pompe studied comparative literature, German language, and musicology at the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana. His bachelor's degree was in musicology and German language, which was followed by a master's degree in musicology, and 2 years later, also a PhD in musicology. He's also the head of the Department of Musicology at the Faculty of Arts, and is a published author and a member of national expert committees. So, welcome.
Welcome.
And Dr. Anthony Mangiacotti is a qualified psychologist who currently works at the Department of Philosophy, Sociology, Education, and Applied Psychology at the University of Padova, and is a visiting researcher at the Middlesex University, also at the psychology department. He does research in cognitive psychology, music psychology, neuropsychology, and neurocognitive rehabilitation. This these will also be the topics that he will cover this evening. And his current project is also based on cognitive implication of music training in older adults and with and without cognitive impairment. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody.
Good evening also from my side. My name is Omar and I will be co-moderating and helping to guide this discussion. So welcome to our round table. I imagine that most of us have wondered at some point in our lives, maybe while listening to a concert or our favorite tune at home, about just how it's possible that a certain combination of sounds can elicit such enjoyable, elaborate, often also very emotional and intense experiences in us. So today, we will be digging into the underlying brain processes of these experiences of music, then trying to understand music also from socio-cultural and as a form of art, and then continue with exploring its influences that it has on our development and also our cognitive functions. And finally, we will look into the ways of how these influences can be used to our own benefits. So let's start with the basics and turn to Dr. Anthony. So what are these underlying processes? What structures, what mechanisms lie in between the sound waves, then auditory stimuli, and finally our subjective experience of music?
I prepare a little PowerPoint presentation in order to show you some images as well. Let me see if I'm able to share my screen. Okay. So, okay, can you see my the PowerPoint presentation? I think so. Yeah, okay. So since that I know that some of you have different backgrounds, I thought to divide my presentation three main areas in order to be able to reply to your question. So I will give you a little brief introduction about the neuroanatomy and the different structure, including sound and music processing, and then we will look more in deep on how brain understand, for example, sounds and where melody and rhythm are processed in our brain. And finally, we will try to understand also the entrainment. So why do we move according to rhythm, and also why some particular music excite us as well. So why anyone interested also in music want to study the brain? It's difficult to imagine how a description of a brain cells or and their various connection and activity levels could possibly explain our experience of music, no? And neuroscience, we believe that although we normally think, talk or sing about different behavior experience, no, without references to neuroactivity, the brain is ultimately involved in the production and the control and can control our thoughts and feelings. So there may be a way of explaining these phenomena with reference to specific brain process. And furthermore, also referring to this point, music provides a unique window, no, to understand how our brain works. So briefly talking about our brain is an enormous and complex and powerful biological organ that controls movement, coordination, emotions, and even thoughts. And the brain of a typical adult weighs from 1.5 kilos almost, but inside it can have more than 100 billion nerve cells. And our brain is the product of 1 million years of evolution, and it functions with unimaginable complexity. So in an atomic point of view, our brain is divided, as we know, into a hemisphere, the right and the left, and that are connected with the corpus callosums. And our brain is composed from a gray matter, that is where we found the body neurons, and then the white matter, that are the Hassan's hat, so the part that connects all the neurons as well, that are situated more in deep in the brain. Our brain is composed in 3 parts, and these are important because then we will see the relation with music in order to reply to our questions. So we have the cerebellum part, that are all these things, this part of the brain, that pink one. And then we have the cerebellum, and finally our brainstem. So our brain is divided in different parts of lobe, and each lobe has a specific function. For example, the frontal lobe is where is characterized because it's the part of the brain that is used for our attention, concentration, inhibition process, and where it is also located our language process, the Wernicke and Broca areas that have an important also function in music, as we will see. Then we have the temporal lobe that most of us know as the memory, retrieval part of the brain, but also have also important function in the speech processing and comprehension. And then we have the occipital, our parietal lobe, that is responsible for the association, integration of sensory information coming from the external world, such as, for example, tactile sensation, verbal information, music sounds, and also helps us to elaborate symbolic context, such as calculation or, for example, the music language. And then we have our occipital lobe, where is specialized in visual processing, and the cerebellum that is associated with absolute timing and and the duration of time also, and is also control also the fine motor coordination, including the rapid movement, for example, of articulation when we speak. So how does music get inside our brain? Music starts with a vibration by the voice of an instrument, and the vibration causes movement in the surrounding air molecules, which we ultimately perceive as sound. This vibration collides with our eardrum, and then the eardrums respond to movement of the air molecules, and with a complex chain of events is initiated that some physiological and neural activity that they, at the end of the process, let us to perceive the sound. This vibration that enter in our eardrum then strict our cochlea. So that is this sort of things here. So our cochlea has a basilar membrane, that is this blue membrane here, that is like a string of a guitar. The motion of this string creates some different frequencies, activated by some particular frequency. For example, high frequency will be at the beginning of the cochlea, instead the low frequency will be at the end. I will activate at the end of the cochlea. And each when the cochlea is activated, it elicits the vibration of some tiny hairs inside of an organ of our inner ear. And from these mechanisms, this mechanism will start to activate, to fire some electric pulse that will go directly to our auditory cortex. And these extraordinary mechanisms for detecting the movement of the air molecules allowed us to distinguish roughly from a range of 20 to 20,000 hertz frequencies, That is our ear spectrum. So the action of the cochlea generate trains of neural dischargers in separately tuned fibers in the auditory nerve, which ultimately propagate into the primary auditory cortex. That is where we are able to perceive the sounds. The activity of the brain cells in response to changes in the frequency is described as the tuning curve of the brain cell. There are other cells that are neighbor of the primary one that responds to similar frequencies. This process is only the beginning because music involves far more than individual frequencies. Brain responses to melody, harmony, tonality, rhythm, and timbre are distributed across several regions in ways that we are only beginning to understand. So now that we arrive in, the music is arrived in our brain, where it is processed. As many of you know, the brain can commonly be divided in two parts. So more analytical part, that is the left part of the brain, and a more creative part. And you need to know that at the beginning of the 20th century, there was this commonly knowledge that the several aspects of music were processed only from the right part of the brain. And so there was this kind of principle of hemispheric dominances and the lateralization for the musical domain. Nowadays, instead, we know that all the brain processes some aspect of music. And so, for example, though the right hemisphere has some particular response to some particular feature of the music. For example, it can help us to track the beat, for example, to recognize pitch and timbre. We know that the left part instead is more responsible, for example, in a rhythmic discrimination and reproduction, or to some language-like skills, for example, sight reading of music, naming notes of pieces, and melodic recognition. There was a study conducted by Di Pietro in 2004, in which the authors found that one professional musician who suffered from a left temporal stroke was left with a preserved skill related to meter and melody, but was not able to discriminate or reproduce a rhythm. So intrinsically, his musical arrhythmia was observed only in the auditory modality, indicating that the stroke had damaged an area of the brain specialized in auditory rhythm. And finally, some musical tasks, such as interpreting a chord that is out of a place in a musical style, may be elicit brain activity in both the hemispheres. So, left or right, there are neural mechanisms underlying music that appears to be distributed across regions. But some of these properties, some musical skills, are processed, depends on the music education. For example, in a research that was conducted from Ono and colleagues, the authors have performed a study in which, with a magnetoencephalogram, they analyzed 8 musicians and 8 non-musicians. And they found out that a rhythmic hemispheric dominance was in non-musician, and while instead both the hemisphere were activated for the musicians. So we can say that musicians have more bilateral neural connectivity than non-musicians for the plastic developmental change that are caused by the musical training. There are other factors, for example, that can influence our brain lateralization in understanding music patterns. And this can be depending also on the culture. So there are studies conducted by Tudor and colleagues in which authors found that Japanese, for example, process traditional music, popular music in the left hemisphere, while instead we perceive the same kind of music, but more with the right hemispheres. So if we start to map our brain to find out where the music process, where the musical features are processed, there is not only the left and right part of the brain that we need to consider, but also there are the different part of the different lobes of the brain that we need to, that have different, that process different part of music. For example, the frontal lobe is responsible for tracking the tonal structure of music, and it shows activation and inhibition process during music improvisation. And the Broca areas that is responsible for our language production is linked to certain musical function as processing music syntax. Then we have, for example, the temporal lobe that plays a crucial role in the music categorization, or for example, in the identification of familiar song. And then we have the parietal lobe that's responsible for different acoustic sensory information, and the arcuate fasciculus that is very important because it connects the frontal lobe with the parietal lobe. And this part of the brain, it seems that also have particular aspects for people that for the motor movement involving in, for example, during the music patterns, or for example in pitch discrimination. Furthermore, the volumes of specific branches of this arcuate fasciculus are correlated with pitch perception and some production abilities. So people with more accurate pitch, for example, more accurate pitch discrimination, we can say, had a larger arcuate fasciculus compared to non-musician. Then there are other parts of the brain like the cerebellum and the occipital lobe that are involved in motor and perceptual timing or musical imagery. And a particular thing of the our occipital lobe is that it is specialized in visual processing, but it is sensitive, for example, to plastic changes as functions of the experience from other sense. There are many studies, for example, on blind subjects that shows that the occipital lobe may be taken over by the auditory processing when deprived of visual experience. And so, it is activated during musical imagery, for example. So this overall brain involvement can explain why, even if a person suffers from degenerative disorder, can still perceive and remember some familiar music, as can happen, for example, for people with dementia. And there is a well-known case of music featured of some musicians with the neurodegenerative disorder that were still able to produce music pattern. So the famous case of Ravel, for example. Ravel was suffering from a selective amusia. Amusia is defined as a difficulty in the perception or production of music. And he could still perceive and remember his compositions and could conceptualize a new composition. And he was even claimed that he was able to hear new music in his head. However, he had lost his ability with the time, with the neurodegeneration, to convert this musical conception into concrete compositions. There are suggestions that his last work, like his famous Bolero, shows stylistic changes that might be symptomatic of an early deterioration. Bolero is usually repetitive for Ravel, and some authors have suggested that boleros represent this kind of representative pattern, musical pattern in the bolero could be a sign of preservation that is a symptoms of, is one of the onset of the Alzheimer. So repeating always the same kind of pattern is part of the, one of the main features of the Alzheimer. And then there is the case of Visserin-Shebelin that suffered of a series of strokes in his left hemisphere. So, but that left him unable to understand and to produce speech. But in his music abilities, his musical ability were preserved. And in fact, he was able to continue to compose some of his most brilliant work. Schelling case is often cited as evidence that music involves different brain regions, and some of them are anatomically separated from the speech one. So when we discuss on how and where sounds are processed in our brain, however, there is another aspect that we need to consider, our emotions, no? And how is explained our emotionally responding to music. So, for example, one of the great discoveries in the film industry is the extraordinary capacity of musical soundtracks to introduce a visual terror, no? And the recent research has identified some of the brain areas that are responsive to the fearful music. The brain are most strongly associated, the part of the brain that is strongly associated with fear is the amygdala. And there was a study conducted by Gosling in 2005, in which they took some patients with amygdala resection, and they started to make them rate some musical passages to understand if these musical passages were happy, sad, fearful. And however, the group, comparing them to a control group, of course. This participant without amygdala were able to identify, for example, happy and sad music, but they were impaired in the recognition of frightening music. So without the amygdala, it's like that we are not able to perceive the arousal aspect of the music, the fearful arousal aspect of the music. Other neuroimaging studies instead have revealed many other regions of the brain that are engaged when we respond emotionally to music. For example, you know, the chilling effect, the tremor that often we felt down the spine, no? This kind of tremor is also associated with pleasure stimuli, and this part of this kind of sensation is produced by the brainstem. Most of the region activated from this kind of pleasure stimuli are the same that are activated when we have sex or when we use drugs. We don't use drugs, but you know what I mean, or when we're eating chocolates, for example. And so music can stimulate these same regions. These regions of pleasure are known as the reward circuit, leading to the release of some particular neurotransmitter associated with the reward. For example, the dopamine, the happy neurotransmitter, or the oxytocin, that is usually called like the love neurotransmitter, the love hormones. So as we saw, music, there are different parts of the brain that respond on, that makes us feel some particular aspect of music, of emotions connect to music. And then we have there is another part that is called the limbic part and the cortical structure that are implicated in the brain responses to emotional music. There was a study that used EEG, so electroencephalogram. It is a sort of is a sort of device that allowed us to measure the brain waves of the surface of the brain. And they combine this measure with the fMRI, so when the kind of scan, the one that produced these beautiful images. And the authors found out that pleasant music was associated with several areas of the left hemisphere, including region with the temporal, parietal, and frontal lobe. In contrast, unpleasant music were more strongly associated with the right hemisphere, especially in the region of the frontal and the temporal lobes. So this kind of lateralization may arise because the left hemisphere is generally associated with predictable situation, whereas the right hemisphere is associated more with novelty situation. So it seems that to reply to the first question that Omar, you asked me, it's very difficult to categorize where the brain processes our some musical feature, because there are so many things that we need to consider: gender, gender, type of music, culture, and so on. But what we were able to understand from a neuroscientific point of view is that there are some main brain features, some main brain parts that respond specifically to specific musical elements. So in all of this, there is a beautiful component also that is related to music. So is the fact that when we are in group, we start and we hear some music, we can start also to join together, to clap together, trying to enjoy the music with some specific rhythmic pattern. No? So it ever happened, I think, to all of you that when you were in a concert, you stop to clap the hand with all the crowd. Or, for example, if you're in a stadium, you will start to wave all together in a specific part. So in music biology, the sense of synchronization to an external perceived rhythm, such as the music, is called entrainment. And the entrainment process allowed us to get coordinated with one another. So there are two different types of aspects of the entrainment. The autonomic processes, for example, here, you can see this video. This was when in London was inaugurated the Millennium Bridge. And as you can see, there are the people that are bouncing together, basically going right and left. And this was an unconscious process. And then there is another unconscious process is when we listen to music, for example, and we listen to calm music and our heartbeats start to slow down. Another step, the voluntary adaptation of this type of synchronization is, for example, the hola. In Italian we said hola, I think that is international, no? So when everybody starts in the stadium to do the wave. But and this kind of process, this kind of cognitive mechanism at the beginning was thought to be only uniquely for the human species. As humans, we know when to start, we know when to stop, when to speed up or slow down, no? And but there were studies that's trying to find out the same pattern in primates, but they weren't able to find it. But what if it was? But this kind of process was observed not in all the animals, but in some particular species, the vocal species in particular. And a famous case was the one of Snowball. That was this parrot here. That I will show you a little clip. I hope the audio you will be able to listen. Can you hear it? No. Yes. Anyway, there was this little parrot that was starting to dance on a Michael Jackson song in time with the pulse. So this was a particular study case in which it was found out that this particular entrainment wasn't only of the human, but of some other vocal species. But what is important entrainment? Entrainment is important for different social coordination. For example, when we dance or when we start to coordinate our action, and can have also an affiliative, sorry, I'm not able to pronounce this word, affiliative power. So when people start to engage to each other, for example. So this was a little presentation in order to give you how to stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony.
I hope it was enough. I don't know, but if you have questions, of course, we can debate on this. It was just to give you a little brief introduction about music and neuroscience.
Thank you for this short but very comprehensive introduction to the neuroscience of music.
I would like to point out, maybe not all the audience knows what timbre means. So it's actually
timbre,
like the type color of sound, right?
Yes, right. So, for example, the difference from a piano, if you play a piece of music, the timbre is when you play the same music with a violin or a piano, no? The two different type of sounds is our timbre. So my voice has a timbre that is different from your voice, Omar, no? So we have two different type of timbre.
Thank you.
Instead, then we have the dynamics that of the music that is that we know as, for example, pianissimo, that is when we play soft, or the music of fortissimo when we play very loud the music, and so on.
So there are quite a lot of characteristics that our brain are processing, from
exactly,
tonality to frequency, rhythm, timbre.
And then all of them are processed in different part of the brain, no? As we saw. So this is important because understanding more the neuroscientific part on how these musical features are processed, it will help us also to understand maybe also how to use music a specific way to rehabilitate or people that have specific neurocognitive disorder. Or to enhance some educational process. For example, I think that then Dr. Habe will explain us better this concept. But yes, more understanding how music affects our brain, more we will be able how to use music to improve our brain as well.
With other two speakers, Dr. Habe and Dr. Pompey, have any reflection on the presentation, or would have something to add?
It was really helping Anthony to give this picturesque introduction, because it's difficult to talk about brain in music in brain. You have to see it, you have to feel it in this way. So thank you for this introduction.
Welcome. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise we can continue with the debate. Maybe to ask you, Dr. Pompey, about now we heard about the neuroscientific aspect of music, but maybe from a musicology perspective, how do we understand music from a maybe phenomenological, sociological, and psychological perspective, also cultural?
Yes. What we already heard, I think, is that the music is really complex, and because it is complex, I think it should be used, or it should be more everyday part of our basic education, because it really triggers all kind of spheres in our brain. But this is also, I think this is also the problem, because we people are different. We somehow perceive the same music on different levels. So also the same or the different music can trigger different parts in our brain. So when we are speaking about, for example, emotion in music, and this is the thing we like to speak the most, I think, we can come to conclusion that some people like this music, some people other music, and that we can also be faced with a situation with when one likes the music, the other really hates the same music. And now we must ask ourselves why. If this would be really easy to explain, if we could somehow the perception of music understand only through the functioning of brains, through the processes that are going on, which are basically also electrical or chemical, then I think this situation would not be possible, or this really contrast situation with this plus and minus. So I think when we are asking ourselves how we comprehend music, this is really something which is really complex, and I think different things come in play here. And as you asked me, yes, there are some sociological, maybe anthropological problems there. They can be medical, they can be really neurophysiological problems. They can be cultural, and everything also depends also to your knowledge about music. As Anthony said, the thing that the music is processed by the brain it also means that we must and should and we could learn music. This is something we always forget, because everybody in the world knows everything about music and football. But I think both things must be learned to really apprehend and to understand. I would like to point you to also to the other direction. I studied literature for a long time, and I was asked to come to a round table, and there were the literates and there were the writers, and they were talking, oh, you know, these bloody languages, different languages, and we must always translate. And you musicians, this is so nice. You have one music, and in the whole world, everybody understands music. Even Parrot understands Michael Jackson. But you know, I'm not sure that this is true. That everybody understands everything. That music is something universal. I really think this music is really local. You know, I enjoy, for example, some really strange music. I can enjoy music. I can enjoy string quartets by Arnold Schoenberg, but I'm not sure 99% of people can enjoy this kind of music. What's the difference? Am I somehow damaged? Is my brain damaged? Was my education strange? Was my father strange? Or what's here? But I must tell you, I think the difference in understanding and not understanding this kind of music is really tightly connected to knowledge, to education, because I think music can somehow act like a system. And we have different music and different systems. If we understand this different system, we understand also these different musics. You know, when they were bringing some Beethoven's music, some piano sonatas, I think all of Europeans, if you like classical music or not, you can basically say this music is sad, is not sad, is joyful, you know. You can say this, and there will be pretty much anonymous results about these questions. But they were bringing this music to some people there in Amazonia, and these people were not able to pronounce any of these characterizations. They were not saying it's sad or it's joyful. They were just, what's this? And also they were lacking this system of knowledge how to put the music in their hands, how to understand music. I can tell you just about some simple psychological reactions on music. You know, when you ask yourself, when all the people ask themselves, how do we perceive music? What's the picture of music? Anthony already said that music is actually the physical phenomena. These are the waves, sound waves. It's the vibration of the air which comes to our ear, and at the end of this part we have this phenomenal feelings, emotions, meanings. You know, when we hear, I don't know, when we hear Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, we think that we are now all brothers. I don't know, there's some music that you think that you are transcending the world on some. What happens, you know, from this physical vibration to these feelings that go way above? And I think this is the main question, and this is the really complex thing. It's as I said, sometimes it's sociological problems, sometimes anthropological, sometimes it's connected with our knowledge. So I really think that we should study more about music and know more about music. We all, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Would any of the other panelists want to comment on the said?
Gregor, you said we should learn. It's okay to learn, but I would like to emphasize not learn just by our intellect. What I lack in our music schooling nowadays, it's musical experience. We talk about music, but the music has to be experienced with all of our senses. Without that, music stays somewhere far away of us. We need experiences. So what our educational system needs, it's inspirational music teachers that would come to classrooms and play music and sing music, not just talk about music. I'm all into this learning in music, and I would agree with you how important music is for developing all the areas of our development. The starting point should always be experience. That's my opinion.
I think that also I agree about this. Just came out in my mind, for example, how during the past decades, we in our society, for example, changed the way how we experienced music. For example, it was more commonly for example, during the 30s, 40s, for people to also whistling, while they were walking on the street or while they were working. And nowadays, instead, we are even afraid to sing while we are working or while we are performing something. So this also because I think that there are some social factors, of course, that influence this kind of process. But yes, we should be back also to that specific culture in which music was something normal, that wasn't something to be afraid of, to extend as well.
Yeah, I think that we pushed music away out of our lives, but it's in our roots. It defines us as humans. So we have to get it back to be more human with music. And I'm convinced that with music, we can change ourselves and we can change our society, as it was already known by ancient philosophers. They were convinced how we can change our personality and the whole community with music, as Plato outlined.
Thank you. Also reflecting on how far back the music goes in our history, and also looking at it from evolutionary perspective, it's interesting to think, is there this universal perception of music in our genome, written in the genome, and to what extent, while on the contrary, we have this culturally dependent perception of music as well.
Sorry, Omar, can you repeat the question? Because I lost the connection just a little bit.
Can you hear me well? No?
Yeah. There was a problem in the connection, so wasn't able to listen to the question.
Yes, I was reflecting on this concept of universal perception of music, a universal understanding of, let's say, tonality, rhythm, melodies. Let's say that certain harmonies, according to musical theory, elicit joyful experience, or let's say that they sound really good to us. So how much is that universal? How much is it kind of written in our genes in an evolutionary way from way back? And how much maybe it is socially learned through the centuries? Yeah, I was reflecting on this.
I think it goes hand in hand. There are some features of music that are universal. So every human has music written in our genome. So that means that we have inborn musical capacities, but that are just basic musical capacities. Gordon referred to these capacities as audiation, and that means that if we hear something we can differentiate if the two, let's say, we hear two musical pieces, short musical pieces, and every one of us can say if these pieces are the same or these pieces are different. And we differentiate this in melody and in rhythm, you know. But the intensity of this ability differs between musicians and non-musicians. It is there by all of us, but the intensity of this it's different. So there are universal features, and I'm convinced if we trained children, if only children listened to music and sang to music more, we could all develop quite well our musical abilities, our musical skills, you know, but we do not do this. So here comes in focus enculturation, this social aspect. And here the education plays an important role.
Yes. If you ask me about universals, yes, a human being has these musical capabilities. Everybody has it. This is true, but not everybody is developing them. This is the problem sometimes, cultural problems, sometimes sociological, sometimes political, and so on. Sometimes the problem of the family. But I think I understand your question also a little bit differently. Connected to that, what I was proposing, namely that we all listen to music, but we listen nowadays to really different music. And sometimes we are not able to cross the differences between these musics. We have also, I think, some kind of different cultures who listen to different music. And the question goes, why? And is the music really universal? I think from the psychological point of view, we don't have a lot of musical impulses that would trigger totally same reaction in people. Mm-hmm. Basically, this is, for example, these universal things are loudness of music. If you, for example, compare two different headphones, you will always say that the better sounding is the louder headphones. So the loudness is one universal factor. And when the loudness became too much, then we also have all the same reaction. We just run from this loud music. This is one, this is loudness. The second one is what Anthony already said about the slow music and fast music. Slow music can somehow temper down the heartbeat, and the fast music can bring it up, you know. It's also something with the music which has really pronounced bass, you know. Maybe you have all this experience when all the internal organs were playing music when in some club, you know. This is also can be universal. Sometimes it can be claimed that the melody, which goes up and down, is really in almost all the cultures connected. When it goes down, it's connected with something more, but it's more depressed. You know, when your body goes down, you know, like this. So like also the melody goes down, and when the melody goes up, you feel uplifted, you feel joyful. But I'm not sure this can be already 100% universal. So I think we do not operate with a lot of these musical universalities, as I would like to say that a lot about music is learned, but I think we learn on two ways. One is directly from experience, and this is what everybody learns. When you go, I think maybe. That we have too much music now, because we hear music everywhere. When you go to the shopping mall, you hear it. On the television, you hear it. On the radio, you hear it. when you're waiting at the doctor's, you hear it. You know, where you have a telephone, you hear it. Everywhere you hear it, and you learn music by the experience. I think the problem is nobody learned you how to really comprehend this music. I think. Why? Because, you know, in the school you learn about literature. You learn really tough theoretical stuff, how to read a poem. If you imagine, if you go back to your high school, we really learn how to understand a poem. But nobody gives you some basic instrumentarium how to understand the music. You know, this is what we learn. We learn out of experience, and the music which we learn out of experience really uses all these musical words, these capabilities of music, really on some basic or the first level, I think. So this is why I was so saying that we must be more, that music should be more integral part of our education, especially because we know that the adolescent people listen a lot to music, that this makes 80% of their day life is music.
Can I add something, Gregor? You gave me a great clue, because how important is preschool period? We many times underestimate our children. We think, oh, they should listen just children's songs or what we listen. But they're so open. Herr Graves talks about a period in child's life, and he addresses it as open-earedness. That means that children are actually listening with all ears open, and they can feel what is really nice. And we underestimate them because they can feel different musical genres as very interesting. I have one story. I was so amazed. My younger child, I think he was like 7 months old, and my father is a composer, and he was listening to mezzo, and it was the opera Julius Caesar. And my little child, 7 months old, he was listening with such intense interest, and I was thinking in my head, well, he's gonna listen to it just for a little while. And he was listening to it like for 15 minutes. And I was amazed. And I know everything from theory about his open-earedness, but the experience was really shocking. And we really have to have in mind how important it is for not just for our children, for our whole society, that we give our children really diverse, qualitative music, to educate them, to be good listeners, to know what is the beauty in music. And that's why they have to listen really, really to different musical genres already in preschool, especially in that time.
And if I can add something also, I think that connecting with what Gregor said, was also, we should teach also how to teach how to use music in a sort of right way. For example, I'm thinking of the mood matching experience. So we know that there was at the beginning, it was called the Mozart effect. You know, there was this kind of mediatic fact that classical music was improving brain cognition. Nowadays, we know instead that is the emotional aspect of music that is intrinsic of the music that increase our brain functioning, for example. So, but what some researchers found out, for example, Dr. Franco in a recent research found out that is the music that, for example, is mood that elicitates some good brain responses. So, for example, can improve our cognition. So I think that here emerge another aspect, that is also listen to different kind of genre, listen, approach to music even from when the baby is in the womb, I will say as well. But also then how to teach that there are some particular kind of music that can create some particular kind of feeling. So if we teach that, we will be able also to use music also to, for example, relax us better, or for example, to concentrate us. So let the child, for example, understand there are some particular type of music depending on the state of his feelings that can be more, can elicit more arousal compared to others, and they should be also free to listen to what they want just for this, because in this way they will be able to, following the path of their cognitive the cognitive performance. So my cognition is telling me that this is good, I should follow this pathway, because there is something intrinsic that, as you asked, there is some maybe genetic feature of the music, or maybe some evolution aspect of the music, that specific person that attracts them to that specific kind of genre, or that specific kind of melody, for example.
And I would like to add something more. How important it is for children to listen to the silence. Because as Gregor pointed out, we are always triggered by music wherever we go. And it's so beautiful. And children need silence to get these aesthetics from music also. It's important to learn to listen to silence.
As a counterpart, make the music then even more rich. Listen to music and an experience. Okay, thank you very much. And maybe a question to Dr. Habe. Connecting with child exposure of a child during development to music, and what is the importance of or a difference between only listening to music on one hand and listening plus playing perhaps an instrument or singing?
It's in every activity is like this. When we are involved more, the effect is larger, and it's the same with music. When we listen to the music, some parts of our brain react to it, but and usually just functional changes happen. And when we are actively involved in music, also structural changes can happen if we are training music for a long time, especially if we begin before the age of 7. These effects get even larger. So that's why it's so important to inspire children to learn music, because I say sometimes out of fun, but it's true, that's the best fitness for your brain that you can get. And it's so simple, and it also gives you chills when you're doing it. So why not using it? We as humans, we are kind of stupid, I would say. We have music, and we can do with music almost whatever we want. It's the most magical tool to enhance our motor abilities, our cognitive abilities, our affective abilities, let's say emotional and social abilities, and aesthetic abilities. So do we use it? Not far enough as we could. So we could use it also in our educational system more. We could use it as a transfer tool for enhancing our other abilities more. But we're not doing it. We're pushing music, as I already mentioned, aside. Why? I do not know. It's a mistake in our system. And I would also like to emphasize how Many times I hear from teachers, oh, I give my pupils to listen to music when they solve, let's say, mathematical tasks. And I say to them, you give them to listen music when they're doing it? Even worse, they're doing when they're writing tests, exams. So, well, that can be really detrimental. Don't do it. You have to train children how to use music, what music enhances their cognitive abilities. So when using music in an educational setting, you have to ask yourself a question. What is the purpose that I want to use music for? So, do you want to just like basic, do you want to activate a pupil, or do you want to relax pupil? You know, that is the main thing. And then we go even further. We go there. Then we have to think, do we use loud music or do we use soft music? If we want to activate, we would use louder music. If we want to activate, we would use faster music. And we have to choose right genres. As already Anthony talked about, we have to know which music is more preferred by our pupils. If we would just give them classical music and they hate it, they're not used to listening to it, it would be a shock to them, and that wouldn't increase their learning. So we have to train them how to do it. But there are some universals. Yes, they are, because the vibration in music is directly linked to our physiological response. So there are some types of music that are more beneficial than others. And then that can be also seen in Masaru Emoto's experiments, where we can see how different types of music form different types of crystals. One crystals, let's say like in Mozart or Beethoven's music, they form really symmetrical crystals. Or let's say heavy metal, more distorsive music, form really dispersed crystals. So all these features of music are important to be aware of when we plan how to use music in a classroom. And the other important thing is that it is more beneficial to use music before doing one task. So in Mozart effect, it's like that you first listen to Mozart sonata like kind of musical fitness, you know, and then you solve spatial temporal tasks. So it's not so simple as someone would think. Oh, we just put some music there and that's it. No. And it's really important that all of scientists, let's say neuroscientists, psychologists, musicologists, music pedagogues, that we all collaborate in this. Because when you read neuroscientific works, some musicologists would say, well, where's the music here? These musical elements aren't really taken into account, you know? And when musicologists, let's say, do some research, psychologists or neuroscientists could have something to say. So we have to collaborate in this.
Thank you. So this also implies for studying, listening to music while studying, right? Mm-hmm.
And another important feature that also was outlined by Anthony, music always goes hand in hand with motion, you know, motion, emotion, and music. That's all together, you know, and we forget that even if we use music in educational setting, it's much more beneficial if we use it also with the motion. So if, let's say, at geography or history, we're learning some facts, we could do a song out of it, rhythmical song, but also clap with it, not just express like this or move with it or just walk with it. It will increase our brain capacities more than just like doing it like singing or so.
That's very interesting. Also, maybe to ask a bit more about the brains of musicians. So, what do they share in common? There have been a lot of studies also done. Also, your research work focuses quite a lot on musicians or people who do music for work. Could you maybe tell us more about that?
Yeah, as I already pointed out, if we talked about a prolonged musical training, not just learning music for a few months, but let's say if we begin musical learning at the age, let's say at 7 or 8, you can see structural changes in the brains of musician with compared to non-musician. I think that Anthony already mentioned that corpus callosum is enlarged by musicians. That means that the brain capacity of musicians is actually more effective, and musicians need to have larger corpus callosum because they need to combine intuitive, holistic thinking with analytical thinking in music all the time. It doesn't go just like using right hemisphere, but in musician left hemisphere is much more activating when listening to or actively be involved in music. The other structure that is enlarged in male musicians is cerebellum. And it was also found out that gray matter volume differences in motor and auditory and visual spatial brain regions is increased in musicians. So I think that Anthony should add something more in this matter because this is more his field of research than mine. You should.
Here we are. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, relating to there are all the part of the after-dance or learning processes, no? As well as Katerina said, when we learn music, we improve some different function as attention, memory, and other processes that then we can use in other different contexts. And there are these studying about differences between musician and musician. No? For example, they shown how musicians are more able to identify some melodic pitch, the melodic expectation of music, for example, some melodic features of the music compared to non-musician. And also how, for example, as we said, showing the previous slide, there was this part of there are differences between musician and non-musician in the lateralization. For example, non-musicians tend to use more one part of the brain, while musicians tend to use both parts of the brain. Or there was the study about blind musicians that were more able to use the occipital part compared to non-musicians. So it's like that they are able to activate some imagery process of the music. So they are seeing the music while they're playing. So music then can stimulate our prefrontal cortex. So, for example, it found out that a musician has a more sustained attention compared to non-musician. So they're able more to stay on the in focus on the task they are doing. Let's see, for example, when we are talking about improvisation, no? Improvisation is something, is a process that involves different cognitive abilities that can involve our prefrontal cortex, our motor function. We need to be able, for example, to retrieve some particular aspect of some previous melody from our memory and try to readapt on the context. Because improvisation, for example, more we use is like to be prepared to resolve problems because we don't know what comes next. So what the researcher found out was that people that use a lot of improvisations inside their musical expertise, so they practice a lot of improvisation, they were more able to perform activity in problem solving, or they are more able to, for example, use their working memory, especially in the capability to elaborate, manipulate information. So musician has a power. So like that has an engine with one more gear compared to non-musician.
Yeah, so it's so good to be musician.
Yeah. So for this also is important to learn, no? That learning music, it can happen also in at 80s year, so it doesn't matter at what age.
Mm-hmm. And this is the thing, you know, this research about neuroplasticity really opened up this learning capacity of music, because it can really never end. There are some critical periods, yes, there are, but we can learn music anytime. It will go slower if we are older, that's for sure, but we can do it.
Dr. Pompey, maybe do you have any reflections? Also maybe from a composer's perspective, since you do also write music.
Oh no, this is difficult. I would like to go a step back when Katerina was talking about the problems that we should work together. The specialists for the cognitive musicology, neurophysiology, musicology, and so on. When I was reading a lot about music, psychology of music, I was reading a lot about the perception of tone, perception of interval, perception of chord, perception of material music, of different scales. And this is true. I always, when I was reading this, I said, okay, this is interesting, this is nice, but one tone doesn't make a music, you know. Perception, when you have a musical piece, you have, I don't know, thousands of tones, different tones. So I think this is the problem, that music is made out of really different particles, and we can find a way to understand how one particle element, one sound element triggers our brain. But when we come to this complex combination of tones, interval, chords, then begins the problem. I attended, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago, some conference about epilepsy, and there is a known fact, or I don't know, is this a fact or maybe anecdote, that there is some Mozart sonata for 2 pianos that somehow you can use when you have this attack, epilepsy attack, that it helps. This was for me really strange, because this piece of music, I think it's nothing special. I don't see what is specific about this music. And there was another guy, a really serious doctor, really specialist for epilepsy, who said, you know, I tried this also with Joseph Haydn. Haydn and Mozart lived in the same period of time. But you know, Haydn doesn't help. And then then we listened to this Haydn, and I said to myself, no, you know, this is not good. This is not good, because, you know, when he was speaking about Mozart, this was sonata for 2 pianos.
In D major, yeah, that's
and this was sonata which was played in the steady tempo from the beginning till end, 2 pianos, same color, same timbre. And the other one was Haydn's Symphony, which began with the whole orchestra really slowly and then faster, full of contrast. This was totally different music. You know, and this doctor said to us, you know, you see, the Mozart is the king of epilepsy. No, I think not the Mozart. This special timbre, this special rhythm, this is the king of epilepsy, not Mozart. So this is the thing when we should try to work together to move constantly between perception of particles and perception of this complex thing called music, which engages, as we already said, different parts of our brains.
That's true, but there's really something about Mozart. It's an interesting documentary testing Mozart, and I advise everyone to watch it. It's on YouTube. And there is one researcher from, I think, from Vienna, Balzer, it's his name, and he did mathematical measures of different musical pieces, and he found out that in Mozart music there is the best balance between tension and relaxation. So that's measured, and I really think I was exploring Mozart effect for my doctoral thesis, and I was really amazed because why I started studying Mozart effect, because I doubt it. As a musician also, I said, well, I do not believe it. And it was so funny because then I did EEG research and I was shocked. It's really something different. It's not the same. And here we come to some universal features that have to do with these basic elements in music, and these basic elements of music, by my opinion, lies in symmetry of music. Why do I have Flower of Life in back of my picture? It's for a purpose, because also when the beauty in music happens, we come there to the unity. And this Flower of Life, this is a visual thing, but we have this in music also. This chord, how do you say this in English, Gregor? You are more into this. A chord circle, you know? Yeah, am I right? If you do this, this is the same as Flower of Life. And this is the unity that lies in visual or in auditory. And when someone, as a musician, captures the most of it, this synchronizes with our organism the best. And the effects of music, these universal effects of music, happen then, you know?
And be noticed.
Yeah, yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I advise all of you to read something about sacred geometry in music. For me, this is like, wow, science fiction, but amazing.
There was something also about Beethoven, or Bach, about the mathematics of music, you know. It was fantastic.
Now, when we are talking about these effects of music on our psychology, on our cognitive capabilities, cognitive functions, music has also in recent years evolved in medical settings as a sort of therapy for certain neurodegenerative or neuropsychiatric diseases. Dr. Anthony, maybe you could share some more information or experiences on this?
Anthony, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you. You will have to unmute.
I'm not understanding why sometimes it becomes unmute or whatever. So, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I was saying, part of my work is also to understand, how music therapy works. And so basically for example, my part of my PhD was to understand how music therapy can improve, for example, people's well-being and cognitive function, especially in older adults with cognitive deficits. But there is, first of all, I would like to say that there is a difference, between music therapy and, for example, the musical experience that we all know. For music experience, is a multisensory motor, experience that have different transfer or learning. So starting to listen to music or playing an instrument, we know, as Katerina and Gregor said, that we can improve our concentration, attention, even executive function or mathematical ability. There are different studies that show that. By music therapy is when there's a specific intervention, which is part of some oriented sensory stimulation approaches for people with cognitive decline, or with psychiatric disorder, and that has a rehabilitative aim. The important thing is that in music therapy, you have music therapists that are qualified professions. It's a qualified profession. For example, in UK, you need to do a master of 2 years to become a music therapist. So it's like a psychotherapist or psychologist. Is a therapy, as the name say. That use the music as a means of communication. And it is based on two processes. One is the improvisational process, and one is the mood matching process. So, as we said before, the improvisation is the process during which rhythm, melodies are produced for the first time, and both for the listener and for the people that are listening, And this process and the protocol are closely related. In music improvisation, music therapy is used also to enhance and strengthen some social cognitive skills, and is a way of communication. So when, for example, we are working with people with severe dementia that are not able to use their verbal processing, music improvisation can be used as a way to communicate their feelings, their mood. And the other part of music therapy is the mood matching approach. So basically is what we said before, the fact that the therapist improvise musical routines and interaction based on the client's mood, and continuously adapt the music features on this purpose. Music therapy has different benefits. For example, there are studies that conducted by Raglio in which explore the effects of music therapy in behavioral changes. They can improve, music therapy was found out to improve autobiographical memory of people with cognitive deficit, or can improve communication. And there are different types also of music therapy, like the neurological music therapy or improvisational music therapy, and so on. We conduct, for my PhD, for example, we conduct a study in which we investigated the use of 4 months of music therapy in a group compared to a group that was attending a 4 months of storytelling activity, And we try to use different kind of, we were able to recruit 65 participants in total. In collaboration with a care home provider in the UK that was MHA, Methodist Home. And we basically use some psychological tests, like, for example, the mini-mental. So that is a cognitive test to measure general cognitive function. We use interviews, focus group, and also we were interested on the physiological aspect, on how music therapy works. And what we found out what we used was to collect the saliva of this participant to measure some particular hormones like cortisol, that, as we know, is associated with stress level, and another hormone that is called DHEA, dehydroandrosterone. It's very long. That is another hormone that is that influence our that is related to the brain cognitive functioning. So people that are healthy has more of this hormone compared to people that are cognitive not healthy. And what we found out basically was that people attending music therapy over the 4 months improved not only their cognitive abilities, like attention, memory, and so on, but also they decrease the stress level. So, for example, the cortisol level decreases significantly compared to the other group that was attending storytelling. So music, when used in a therapeutic way, so by some professionist that knows how to use some specific features of music, like the tempo, the rhythm, the timbre, the music itself, because the music that are used in music therapy are part of the background of the patient. So sometimes they can use, for example, some particular music that are from the past of the childhood of the patient, in order to elicit some memory, to start to talk about some argument, or, for example, to express some feelings. Can be fear, can be expressing of, for example, happiness, and so on. And nowadays, instead, music therapy is also used in different contexts, not only in people that can have a cognitive decline, but, for example, let's think about the autisms. There are a lot of different studies. And let's think about, for example, the Northern Robins that use music therapy to approach children with different kind of developmental disorder, especially in the autism. So unfortunately, music therapy, since that involves music, for science, a lot of scientists, is not a proper therapy. So that they need to find more studies. Doctor says, oh, we need to have more empirical study, more randomized control trial. And so we are trying to demonstrate this. For example, now we were able to win a grant from Downhill Medical Trust for a 3-year project that we will conduct in London, in which we will understand how different types of music therapy can work to improve cognitive well-being, not only in people that have, for example, cognitive dysfunctioning, so people that can have, for example, some types of dementia like Alzheimer, Parkinson, and so on, but also in a healthy aging. So people over 65 that have normal cognitive functioning, to understand if music therapy can be, or some particular type of music therapy can be useful to foster the cognitive reserve. The cognitive reserve is a sort of, let's say, storage of our brain that we accumulate during the time. And when we start to have some decline, we start to use this storage in order to compensate to some deficit. For example, if a person that starts to speak 4 languages, that was very involved in voluntary work, that play music and was a dancer, start to build up his cognition and was able to develop different type of connection in the brain that in case something happened, this person is still able to perform a specific function, because even if a pathway is not more, for example, open because there was a damage, we can use another way, another street, neural street, to, for example, arrive to the specific, to perform the specific function. So what we will understand, we would like to understand if music therapy can also help to build up this cognitive reserve in healthy people, in order to understand if maybe it can be used as a, for example, instead of some pharmacological therapeutic therapy. For example, we know that music therapy can be used in for people with depression as well. So instead of starting to take antidepressive, why not go into some activity, some music therapy activity, in combination then maybe with if something, the depression is severe, of course, that you will need both. But we already know from different research that when you use some psychotropic drugs and combining with some music therapy or even with some psychotherapy, you will shorten the period of the therapy. So let's see what happens.
Thank you so much. So not just therapy, but also as a prevention from neurodegenerative and similar diseases.
Yes.
Really.
There are also, apart from music therapy, there is another bunch of what is called the music cognitive exercises that are different. So music therapy is performed by music therapists that use music in a specific way. Music cognitive training are instead the using of specific exercise based on rhythm or melody intonation that are used, for example, to rehabilitate people with stroke disease, with stroke. Let's think of intonational therapy that you can use with people that have aphasia. So people that are not able to speak anymore, they start to use this kind of therapy that is, generally speaking, we can say a sort of singing, learning how to sing. So using of vocalization, using of some kind of types of rhythm, melodic intonation, etc., in order to help the patient to acquire again some particular language ability that he lost caused by the stroke.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear how all of these techniques are still evolving to be also part of like the clinical part, prevention and healing of the neurodegenerative disorders. Now, unfortunately, the time is kind of coming to an end, but we would like to go through some questions that were asked on Slido. The first one, why does repetition of the same music, though we usually dislike it, lead somehow to that it grows under our skin? So maybe from a psychological perspective, this phenomena of getting really used to a song, even if we dislike it.
Yeah, this happens very often, you know, when you, I don't know, listen to the Eurovision Song Contest, you hate all the songs. When you are hearing them for the second time, you accept them, and the third time you love them. This is the effect, I think, that it's used or was used on the MTV. You know, there is a lot of music, and this industry behind the music pays for that the music is broadcasted. So we know that then when one kind of music is played more often, when you hear it more often, you accept it. This is like everything else, I think, connected with the learning. Right? When you become familiar to, when you know the system, the logic of music is familiar to you, you can somehow perceive it more easily. I think this is really a simple mechanism behind this thing.
Like, and I would add to this question. There are certain chord progressions that maybe, especially in popular music, are known to be more catchy. How does this work in from the perspective of musical theory or psychology? Is there a background to it?
This is something I don't think it's true, really. No, there was done a research about connection with chords, harmony and chords, because, you know, chords give some tension and some relaxation. So we can say that predominantly that this universe of the music that we are listening uses more or less three chords, which are somehow psychologically related. They have tension, they have this tonal center and tension. But, you know, when you move out of this system of tonal music, you can see that it doesn't function anymore. So this functioning is really learned functioning. So it's not that it's something, I think it's something universal, but it is learned. Again, we were listening to a lot of music. Now we experience this music, even if we didn't learn this music. And now we have in our brain all these forms, and we respond in the positive way to them. I would like to say that Katarina was saying something about symmetries in music. You know, in aesthetics of music, there were a lot of attempts to link what is beautiful in music to nature, and it was predominantly linked in the history of music to the Harmonic Series. Do you know what is Harmonic Series? I don't know.
Maybe explain for
yeah,
others.
Yeah. When you hear one tone, you're not hearing just this frequency of one tone, but also other tones are vibrating. This can be explained very good with the piano. When you touch one key at the piano, not only these strings from this particular key are vibrating, but also some others, really so slightly with not so big amplitudes, are vibrating. And this gives the color. And we know how the logic of these higher frequencies that we vibrate goes. We know this logic. And if we expose this logic, the first tones, these harmonic tones, we say to them, expose these harmonies, these major harmonies, major tonality. So in the history of music, there was also said, yes, these are the most beautiful chords because we find them in the nature, because we find them in the harmonic series. But, you know, there is a catch in this harmonic series. This harmonic series is not linked to our tempered system. This is another problem, how to explain what is this tempered system. You know, when you have a piano, all these strings are somehow, this is in the 16th century, you know, you couldn't play all different keys on the piano because they sounded really ugly. Because they weren't able, or to a flute, they weren't able to build these holes on the flute on the right positions, you know. Mathematically, they didn't have this knowledge and ability. So they used only a really small amount of tones we use today. So what I want to say, that the nature knows about microtones, that the nature knows really different kind of music, which is not so mathematically ordered as the music we know, and which was distributed through all the world with the accordion. You know, the accordion was this bloody instrument which could be transported. You cannot transport the piano, you know. So they transported accordion, and now everybody accepted this tempered hearing, because we know the scales of different people were totally different than our European scales, you know. What was the question? I hope, yeah, about chord progression. No, yeah.
Thank you very much.
There is also the fact of the pentatonic scale, no? In a sort of way that relating to your what Gregor said, but relating more on a particular aspect that was interest. That was the fact that the pentatonic scale, for example, this kind of 5 notes progressions, no, are present in a lot of different ancient civilization, and it was born independently between one of each of them. And in fact, this and why this is something, and maybe is, as Gregor said, something that comes from nature, no? That start to build up this kind of harmonic series. Why we how we created this pentatonic series and how it is so important. Usually a lot of music that we listen in pentatonic for us are quite interesting with and everybody can understand them. So it's like a basic feature of music. And there are different studies now in neuroscience also that try to understand, you know, this particular kind of mechanisms and how Gregor said there is a kind of the resonance effect on the pentatonic. The pentatonic is all resonance, so you start from one note, the C, and then you start to create the other notes based on the vibration of the other, so C, E, G, and so on. And there is this kind of fascinating aspect about the pentatonic scale that still lead to some questions as well. So I don't know, what do you think, Katerina?
Yeah, I think that's the thing I was referring before. There are some universals. I would say I have to agree with the both perspectives. I think that there are a lot of things that are universal in music, and these universals connect to these pentatonics. But as also Gregor said, that there are many features that are learned and has to be learned, because in music it's like this. If if we listen to really simple music, we would prefer always simple music. And if we learn about music, so if we include our cognition, we can enjoy, we can prefer also very complex music. So in the basics, all of us like music, and we are like reacting on it physiologically. And on the other levels, we have to learn something to prefer also more complex music. And this thing is more in connection with socialization or with enculturation.
Okay, so to refer to what you just mentioned, our last question, because time is really running out. Is it possible that certain brain abilities and the acceptance of music develop only in early childhood? So if you miss that part of your life?
Yeah, there are critical periods in music, in developing musical abilities, especially with regard to absolute pitch. Because if we would foster, if we would really enhance auditory perception in really early age, that's until the age of 2, you know, all of us have the capacity to be entrained in absolute pitch. And it's really an interesting experiment. You should check on YouTube. It's neural. What can you do? How can you train a small child to enhance this neuroplasticity in a child to develop, let's say, absolute pitch? And if you don't do it by then, it's, yes, as I said, you can do it, but it's so much more difficult that no one should go into this process, because it's like, it's crazy. It really takes so much effort. But for children, it's much easier. And this window for from the neuroscientific perspective for developing musical abilities is somewhere about 7 or 8, at 7 or 8, I think. Yeah. So these are the crucial years also to begin with a musical training, because it's much easier. For children, some things are at the right time to be developed the most. But that's why we have to learn music as soon as possible, but usually not before the age of 4.
Thank you very much. for this answer. And yeah, now
Anthony, you wanted to add something more?
I think that you said everything. Maybe something also. If you have a child, expose that it will be useful so to expose to sound stimuli even when they are in the womb. That is very important. There are different studies that demonstrates how children that listen, which the mother listened to some specific music, they were able to. Their attention was more attracted when they were born on that kind of specific musics. And there is an interesting study about Dr. Politimo that found out how, for example, the exposure also on the musical environment of a child will help them to improve their language abilities. So, for example, if a child grows up in an ambient that is full of music, in which, for example, music is played every day, the mother sings a lot, or the father is singing to him a lot, to her a lot, this child will develop the language ability in a faster way compared to a child that is exposed in a poor musical environment. So expose your children to music.
Absolutely, yeah, an important factor in the childhood and development. Yes, this discussion is ongoing. There are many more things that could be asked still, but unfortunately we are already high on time. So this will bring this roundtable to an end. Really, really warm thanks to our speakers. Thank you for joining us today here and sharing your knowledge, your expertise, your experiences. Also, we would like to thank National Gallery for organizing this event. And warm thanks also to you, dear listeners. Thank you for joining us. Similar events might be organized in the future by our working group in Synapsa. The main event will be in March. This will be Teden Možganov, or Brain Week. So yeah, we wish you good evening and keep listening to music.
Thank you very much.
And keep singing and
Keep singing,
playing
as much as you can.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.